She warned me. 10 minutes was all it would take to ruin us. But some feelings can't be ignored. The day began like any other, ordinary and unremarkable, until I saw her. She wasn't supposed to be there, or at least not in my world. I was fumbling with my coffee and my laptop, trying to catch up on work I had been putting off, when her presence sliced through the monotony like sunlight through a dusty window. She was sitting by the large cafe window, the morning light hitting her in such a way that it highlighted the subtle grace in her movements. She wasn't loud or ostentatious. It was the quiet confidence that made her stand out. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, glanced at her notebook with a faint, almost imperceptible smile, and for a moment, the world narrowed down to just her. I tried to focus on my screen, but my attention kept slipping. I noticed the way her fingers hovered over the page as she wrote, how her eyes flicked up now and then to watch the street outside. There was a kind of serenity in her presence, a calm that I hadn't realized I craved until I saw it. Our first interaction was almost accidental. My elbow nudged my coffee cup a little too hard, and it wobbled dangerously toward the edge of the table. In a reflex, she reached out, steadying it with a gentle touch. Our hands brushed for just a second, a fleeting, electric moment, but long enough to make my chest tighten. I mumbled a thank you, embarrassed by how quickly my pulse had spiked. She gave me a knowing smile, as if she understood something I didn't even know about myself. We started talking. At first, it was polite, surface-level conversation. The weather, the cafe, maybe a shared frustration about the slow Wi-Fi. But there was something beneath her words, a subtle, unspoken depth. I found myself listening harder, hanging on to the pauses and the inflections, trying to catch the hidden layers. Her laugh, soft and warm, made me want to hear it again, even though we had only met. I noticed every little detail, as though they were clues to something larger. The way she tilted her head when she listened, the faint scent of her perfume that lingered in the air long after she shifted, even the way she held her pen between her fingers, delicate but purposeful. My mind was hyper-aware, cataloging every motion, every fleeting expression, as if memorizing her would make this moment last longer. By the time I left the cafe, I was already caught in a strange, quiet fascination. There was no rushing, no urgency, just a lingering curiosity that settled in my chest. I didn't know her name yet, didn't know what her life was like, but somehow, in those few minutes, she had planted a seed. A sense that something significant, something forbidden yet irresistible, was waiting just beyond the surface. And as I walked away, I realized I had been smiling like an idiot, hoping, without even fully understanding why, that I might see her again. After that first encounter, I couldn't stop thinking about her. It wasn't just her appearance, though she was undeniably captivating. It was the way she carried herself, the effortless grace that seemed natural, yet somehow rare. My thoughts kept drifting back to the cafe, to the brush of her fingers against mine, to the warmth of her presence. It was unsettling, in a way, to feel so drawn to someone I barely knew, someone who existed in a different, older world, full of experience I hadn't yet lived. And yet, fate, or perhaps coincidence, seemed determined to keep her in my orbit. I saw her again at a bookstore a week later, browsing the same section I had wandered into almost absent-mindedly. She looked up from the shelves as I approached, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips, and my chest tightened with recognition and anticipation. I realized how quickly I had begun noticing her patterns. The way she lingered over certain titles, the way she tapped a finger against the spine of a book as if weighing it carefully. Our conversation began with the usual pleasantries, but beneath the polite words, something unspoken was growing between us. There was a subtle energy, a current of curiosity and mutual awareness, threaded through the pauses and the glances. Every so often, our hands would brush as we both reached for a book, the contact fleeting yet undeniably intimate. I caught her eyes lingering on me longer than necessary, and I knew I was doing the same. There was a silent acknowledgment that something was happening, even if neither of us dared to name it. I found myself analyzing every detail, the tilt of her head, the way her hair fell over one shoulder, the soft, contemplative hum she made when absorbed in thought. Small things that might have gone unnoticed in anyone else suddenly felt significant. And I realized I was holding my breath in anticipation of the next accidental touch, the next fleeting smile, the next moment when our worlds collided. Despite the growing curiosity and attraction, there was tension beneath it. I sensed her awareness of the age gap, of the societal expectations and personal boundaries that hovered between us. There was caution in her gaze, a subtle hesitancy in the way she responded to my questions. And yet, that caution only heightened the intrigue. The awareness of what could and could not happen made every encounter feel charged, electric in its restraint. Even as we parted that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that our connection had deepened without words, almost imperceptibly. I replayed every detail in my mind. The warmth of her hand brushing mine, the softness of her voice, the way her eyes seemed to hold a story I wanted desperately to understand. And I knew that this was only the beginning. The curiosity had taken root, and there was no turning back. I wanted to know her, not just her smile or her elegance, but the woman behind the quiet confidence, the one who carried both strength and vulnerability. Emotional goal recap. Deepen the slow-burn tension by showing mutual fascination, highlight unspoken attraction, explore age gap awareness, and reinforce sensory-rich, YouTube-safe intimacy through fleeting touches, glances, and internal reflection. The next time we spoke, it wasn't planned. It wasn't in a bookstore or cafe or any place where either of us expected to be seen. It was outside, near the small park by the river. Quiet, a little hidden, where the world felt slower and softer. I saw her sitting alone on a bench, her posture slightly different this time. Not the composed, graceful calm I had come to associate with her, but something more fragile, shoulders drawn inward, gaze distant, lost somewhere far beyond the water. I hesitated before walking over. I didn't want to intrude, but something about the way she stared ahead, like she was holding something heavy, pulled me closer. She looked up as I approached, and in that moment her expression softened, as though she recognized something familiar in me too. Someone safe to be unguarded with. I sat beside her. Not too close, not touching, but near enough that she could feel I was there if she wanted to speak. For a long while we didn't say anything, just the quiet hum of the river, the wind moving through trees, the kind of silence that feels shared instead of awkward. Finally, she exhaled, slowly, like she had been holding her breath for too long. "It's been a difficult week," she said quietly. Her voice didn't break, but it trembled around the edges. I didn't ask what happened. I just waited, and eventually the words came. She spoke about responsibility, about expectations, about how everyone assumed she had everything figured out because she was older, composed, controlled. How the world rarely allowed her to be tired or unsure. How people came to her for advice, guidance, stability, but no one ever asked if she had someone to lean on. "I'm supposed to be strong," she said, her eyes fixed on the river. "But some days I don't feel strong at all." Her honesty struck something deep within me. Not pity, just understanding. I knew what it felt like to be seen as one thing and feel like another beneath the surface. Without thinking, I shifted slightly closer. The side of my shoulder brushed hers. Gentle, warm, offering quiet presence rather than rescue. Her hand was resting in her lap, fingers curled inward. I let mine rest beside hers, not touching at first. Just close enough that if she wanted connection, it was there. She noticed. Her fingers relaxed, opening slightly, not reaching but allowing. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," she murmured. "Because I'm here," I said softly. She turned to me then, and the look in her eyes, it wasn't romantic, not yet. It was trust, something delicate and real. We didn't hold hands. We didn't lean into each other. But the space between us changed. It became a bond, quiet, unspoken, but unmistakably intimate. When we finally stood to leave, she brushed her hand against mine. Light, slow, just enough to say, "Thank you for seeing me," and I understood her without a single word. This is where curiosity becomes connection, where attraction begins to carry emotional weight. After that day by the river, something shifted. Not in any dramatic or obvious way. There were no confessions, no declarations, but the space between us felt changed. Softer, charged, as if every word we spoke now carried its own echo, its own quiet weight. We began to seek each other without admitting it. I found myself gravitating to the cafe where we first met, and she appeared there often enough that it stopped feeling like coincidence. When she entered, the air seemed to change texture, as though the room suddenly had more depth, more gravity. My awareness of her was immediate and total. We talked about small things. Music, favorite cities, childhood memories. But beneath those conversations lived something deeper. The way she listened made me feel like my words mattered. The way I looked at her made her feel seen, not admired from a distance, but understood close up. The physical closeness grew slowly, almost accidentally. Sometimes we sat across from each other at a small table. Sometimes beside each other on a bench, our knees almost touching. And every time one of us laughed, the other would lean in just a little too close, before remembering to pull back. Once, she reached across the table to show me something on my phone screen. Her fingertips brushed my wrist, light, brief, but enough to send warmth rushing up my arm. She didn't pull away quickly. She didn't apologize or pretend the touch meant nothing. She let it linger, just for a breath longer than necessary. Our eyes met in that moment. There was no smile, no attempt to soften or disguise the tension. Just stillness, a quiet acknowledgment. We feel this. And then, gently, she drew her hand back. Her restraint was not coldness. It was care, consideration, a reminder of all the things we were not saying aloud. She was aware of the world that watched her, of judgment she had learned to anticipate long before we met. I saw it sometimes in the way she paused before speaking, weighing how much to reveal, or in the way her gaze flicked downward after holding mine too long. But just as often, I caught something else, a spark of want. Not impulsive or reckless, but deep, buried under years of reasoning and responsibility. One afternoon, we sat outside as the evening light settled into gold. The sky glowed warm, and the quiet around us felt intimate. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and I reached out, almost without thinking, and let my fingers gently move the strand that had fallen again. She didn't stop me. She simply closed her eyes for a moment, a breath catching in her chest. When she opened them, her expression held both tenderness and warning, a plea and a boundary intertwined. "We shouldn't," she said softly. "I know," I whispered, but neither of us moved away. The distance between us had become a place we lived in, close enough to feel the pull, but far enough to pretend we hadn't crossed anything yet. The truth hung between us, unspoken but undeniable. We were already falling. There are moments in life when the world seems to pause, not dramatically, but with a kind of stillness that makes you aware of everything. The sound of your own breath, the space between two heartbeats, the nearness of someone you shouldn't want but do. That's how it felt the evening she finally spoke the words that would stay with me forever. We were in her office after hours. The building was nearly empty. The hallway lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. I had stopped by to drop something off, something small, unimportant, yet somehow it had brought me there at exactly the wrong time, or the right one, depending on how you look at it. She sat behind her desk, hair slightly tousled, glasses resting low on her nose, the slightest signs of exhaustion softening the usual poise she carried. She looked human in that moment, real, and achingly beautiful. "You didn't have to bring this tonight," she said quietly. I shrugged, trying to play off the nervous heat crawling up my neck. "I was in the area. Thought I'd say hello." Her lips curved in a small, tired smile. "You could have just texted." "I know, but I hadn't wanted distance. Not tonight." The silence settled in again, warm and close. She stood and walked around the desk, leaning against its edge, crossing her arms loosely. Her eyes weren't guarded tonight. There was no polite space, no careful emotional distance. Just her, and me, and something we had been holding back for far too long. I don't remember which of us moved first. Only that suddenly we were close enough to feel each other's warmth, close enough that the thin layer of air between us felt charged. alive. I could see the faint freckles along her cheekbones, the soft line of her jaw, the way her eyelashes lowered as her gaze flicked to my mouth before returning to my eyes. My hand lifted, slowly, carefully, to her chin, not touching, just hovering. A question. She didn't step back. But she didn't step forward either. Her breathing shifted. Not louder, just deeper, more intentional. Then she spoke, soft, steady, but with something trembling just beneath the surface. 10 minutes, she said. Her eyes didn't leave mine. That's all it takes to ruin us. The words didn't break the moment. They crystallized it. I understood instantly. She wasn't talking about scandal or gossip or consequences, though those things lingered like storms on the horizon. She meant this, the space between wanting and acting. The choice, the threshold. If we crossed it, whether with a kiss or a touch, or a moment too intimate to take back, everything that lived in silence would gain a name, a truth, a weight, and the world we had built around careful distance would fall. I swallowed, the ache in my chest sharp and warm. Is it already ruined? I whispered. She closed her eyes for a breath. 1, 2, 3. No, she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. Not yet. But she didn't step away, and neither did I. The dangerous thing was how badly we both wanted to stay exactly where we were. We didn't speak of the moment in her office for several days. Life continued in its usual rhythm. Messages, brief meetings, shared conversations. But something had undeniably changed. The careful restraint that once felt like respect had begun to feel like tension. A thread pulled tight, and every time our eyes met, we both knew we were thinking of the same moment. The almost, the nearly, the we were right there, but neither of us crossed that line. It happened one night when the city felt unusually quiet, late enough that the streets were empty, early enough that the sky still held a hint of blue. We had both stayed late, working in different rooms of the same building. When I stepped outside, I found her leaning against the railing just beyond the entrance, looking out over the stillness like she was trying to find something in it. The air was cool, a little sharp in the lungs, but it felt good, clear, honest. Couldn't sleep? I asked, though we both knew it wasn't about sleep. Her eyes softened when she looked at me. That softness was the thing that undid me. Not longing, not desire, just recognition. No, she said quietly. Just thinking too much. I stepped beside her. Not touching, just close enough that our arms nearly grazed. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It felt like the space where truth could finally breathe. She drew in a slow breath. This is dangerous, you know? I nodded. I know. She turned then. Not fully toward me, just enough that I could see her face in the dim light. There was no mask tonight, no practiced calm. Only the woman beneath the composure. The one who laughed quietly at my jokes. The one who sat beside me by the river. The one who trusted me with her tired moments. I don't want to lose myself, she said softly. And I don't want to lose this. The pause was small, but I heard everything inside it. I didn't reach for her. I didn't move closer. I just let my voice soften into truth. You won't, I said. Not with me. Her shoulders dropped just a fraction, but enough to tell me she had been holding tension for a very long time. Slowly, deliberately, she let her hand fall closer to mine along the railing. Our fingers didn't intertwine. They just rested there, touching, barely. The warmth of her skin felt like a confession. Not loud, not rushed, not dramatic, just real. She exhaled, and I felt her lean. Not onto me, but toward me. A subtle shift, as though her body had made the decision before her mind could argue. For the first time, there was no fear in her expression. Just truth. I care about you, she whispered. Not reckless, not impulsive, simply spoken. I swallowed, letting the words settle in my chest before offering mine back. I care about you too, more than I meant to. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. The closeness itself was the confession. And it was enough to change everything. By the time we reached the ending of a slow burn story like this, Something subtle but irreversible has happened between them. The shift is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to, because the most meaningful transformations are the ones that settle into the bones quietly, like warmth returning to cold hands. In the beginning, they were just two people who didn't mean to collide. A younger man, curious but uncertain. An older woman, confident on the outside but quietly holding her breath against history. He met her at a moment when he was still defining who he could become. She met him at a moment when she thought she already knew who she was. And yet, both were wrong in ways that would change them. What makes their ending powerful is that it isn't about possession. It isn't about winning. It isn't about grand declarations or dramatic confessions. It's about recognition. Recognition that something real happened between them. Recognition that they will carry each other, even if the world will never understand how or why. Their love, whether it lasts a lifetime or only a chapter, is not the kind that evaporates. It becomes part of who they are. He is no longer the boy who was trying to prove himself. She is no longer the woman resisting the idea that she is still allowed to feel more, want more, live more. They have rewritten the inner stories they once believed about themselves. He now walks with a steadiness that was not there before. She now laughs with a softness she thought she had lost years ago. He understands intimacy as something expansive, gentle, grounding, not performative. She understands romance as something that can still unfold like dawn, not something that belongs only to youth. They didn't just fall in love with each other. They returned to themselves. And that is the quiet triumph of this story. Because in most love stories, the world wants a clear answer. Are they together or not? But grown love, real love, is larger than whether two people stand beside each other in the final frame. The ending is not about confirming their relationship status. The ending is about confirming that what happened mattered. They will remember each other in moments. When a certain song plays, when a certain kind of laughter breaks open, when a hand grazes theirs unexpectedly, when someone says their name softly in the dark. And perhaps, in a world that rarely gives us the right person at the right time, this was the right person precisely because of the timing. Where they end is not where they began. And that's the point. They changed each other. Gently, completely, quietly, forever. Write the message you've been afraid to send. Say the truth you've been circling around. Let yourself feel something all the way through, instead of stopping halfway at if you want more like this. More slow burn, cinematic, grown intimacy. Stay here. Follow. Share. Tell someone this made you think of them. Let the ripple go somewhere. Because stories like this don't just entertain us. They remind us what our hearts are still capable of.